The purpose of isolation movements is to build up weak links, to get muscle fibers and heads of muscles that do not get worked completely by our big compound movements. So I want to chat with you guys and gals a little bit about this today, because we do see this a lot. You'll see people who try to use isolation work to do their main mass building. And the simple fact of the matter is it's extremely inefficient. And I want to be clear, I make heavy use of isolation movements. These days, I isolate almost every muscle in my body. Probably the only exception might be lats, right? Lats and I guess hamstrings, because I do glute ham raises and things for hamstrings. So for me personally, I isolate a lot of muscles, right? Side delts, triceps, biceps, calves, quads, pecs sometimes, traps. So I do isolate these things. So I want to be clear when I say this, because people will say, well, you're all about just big compound movements. No, I haven't been for a long time. Definitely a phase where that's what I push. But let's be frank here. For most lifters, and particularly novices, that's what they need to be doing. They need to be building their base. They need to be spending 90%, if not 100%. But 90% of their gym effort should be going into big compound movements. And I don't mean that it just has to be squat, bench, and deadlift. I mean, it can be, not just barbells, but, some machines, dumbbells, things like that. Those are acceptable. But yes, most people need to be using big compound movements to build most of your muscle, right? Because they work multiple muscles, right? Think about a chin-up or a pull-up. What all does that work? Well, it works the lats, yeah, but it can work rear delts, works 2/3 of the trap, rhomboids, biceps, forearms, brachialis, radial brachialis, depending on your grips and everything. So, that's a movement that works a lot of muscles. How about a bench press? Works your pecs, your anterior deltoids, your triceps. Right? Squats and deadlifts work tons of muscles through the body. But even a lot of your other smaller compounds, they work a lot of muscles. How about an upright row? Works all three heads of the delt, works the upper traps, works your grip to a limited extent, radial brachialis and then biceps to a very lesser extent. So if you think about it, take those 5 movements I just listed. I mean, that could build almost every muscle in your body, right? Especially if you do chin-ups in there. Chin-ups, bench press, upright row, squat, deadlift. Okay, 5 movements. I just gave you 5 movements off the top of my head. Works almost every muscle in the body. Now, question becomes, does it work every muscle thoroughly? Does it work every head of every muscle? And the answer is clearly no, right? Clearly not. In fact, I would say there's a lot to be said for bicep isolation, and I'm not saying chin-ups aren't a good exercise. I do weighted chins. I like weighted chins. But, you know what? Doing some preacher curls, some barbell curls, these things would be a good idea if you want to finish off your biceps. Why? Well, because while the chin-up can do a lot, a weighted chin-up can do a lot towards your bicep development, doesn't necessarily fully work every angle of the muscle, for one. Number two, it's a big exercise that beats you up really quick. Okay? It will interfere with your recovery if you do too much of it. You might find eventually that just the load on your lats and the other muscles involved starts to create enough fatigue that your biceps don't get as much work as they're capable of handling. And you end up being too fatigued to keep going, right? To keep doing more volume. But what do you usually find after you do chin-ups? You can probably do some dumbbell curls pretty effectively and still do them to failure, right? There's a lot to be said for just the smaller movement being easier to recover from and being able to handle a little more of it tacked on at the end. All right. Well, in my case, I do like 9 to 12 sets of biceps after, but that's me because I need it. I need the arm development. All right. That same thing could apply to a lot of other lifts, couldn't it? All right. How about isolation work for your quads after back squatting? I mean, you can't do that many back squats. They're a phenomenal exercise, but once that workload starts getting real high, it's very hard to recover from it. A lot of axial fatigue. There's certain parts of the quad, at least one of the 4 heads of the quad, doesn't get fully stimulated from a squat. So other movements, maybe sissy squats in this case, particularly leg extensions. I like to do those one-legged. Okay, it can help hit that head. Same thing. Let's talk about the bench. Let's talk about hitting heads of a muscle. Bench press. As far as triceps go, the bench press works the lateral head of the tricep very effectively. We've got hypertrophy studies showing it beats extensions oftentimes, or just straight up adding size to that head. But what about the long head, right? See me doing that extension, that high incline extension? That stretches the long head. A lot of extensions in studies have been found to beat the bench press for the long head of the tricep. Okay? So even though the bench press is technically a tricep exercise, it understimulates the largest of the three heads. Second largest head is a phenomenal builder, arguably one of the better ones because of the movements involved, but it doesn't work the motor pattern to fully recruit that long head, that big horseshoe down by the armpit. Okay, extensions that put us into a stretch, such as what you just saw me doing there, doing here again. That, my friends, will work that head. Okay, same thing when we start talking about different heads of the delt. You start doing too many big, heavy compounds trying to build your shoulders up. Again, can be hard on the joints. Not saying don't do them, because we get a lot of bang for our buck out of those movements. We work a lot of muscles. But it's really easy to recover from a lot of these isolation movements, lateral raises and things. Of course, I'm doing some front raises here. I did lateral raises, I think, in this one too, earlier in this video. Easier to recover from. We can get in and work all those areas. We can make sure that we get all those deep fibers and fully stimulate as much growth as possible out of that muscle. We can work those areas of the muscle that are not getting worked completely by the big compounds. But keep in mind, the big compounds work because all of them build two or more muscles, usually more. You know, things like delts, if we start considering each head of the delt a different muscle, and since they all have different functions, it's fair to do that. Even though it's the biggest muscle of the upper body, it's so spread out with three completely different functions that we could almost count those as different muscles. So again, a lot of these things that we do might put emphasis on the different heads. Right, a lateral raise hits the side head, front raise the interior head, posterior gets worked by rear delt stuff. Okay, it is useful to get in and work all these areas to finish them off, to make sure that we've stimulated growth. That is the role of isolation movements. But keep in mind, the big compounds will generally be the best bang for your buck in terms of training efficiency, and we should usually start our workouts with those to build multiple muscles efficiently. And then once we start to accrue fatigue from those, then we do the isolation work to finish off whatever needs it. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys and gals next time.